I woke up to the soft buzz of my phone around midnight. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made even a small sound feel loud. When I saw Clara's name on the screen, my stomach dropped. Usually, she called me during the day if she needed something. At this hour, it could only mean trouble. I pressed play, expecting a hurried, maybe panicked message. But what I heard froze me in my chair. Clara's voice was sharp, almost cold. She was talking to Daniel, her husband. "Dad," she said, her words cutting like a knife. "He's a burden. Sometimes I wonder why I even try to include him in my life. I can't keep pretending I care all the time." I sat there, gripping my blanket, my heart pounding. My own daughter was saying she was tired of me, that she didn't care. The words repeated in my head, louder than her voice ever could. I could feel a cold sweat spreading down my back. I had spent my life working for this family, fixing her house, helping with bills, even giving up small comforts for her happiness. And now, this. I replayed the message again, hoping I had heard wrong, but the words were the same. She went on, complaining about how slow I was, how she was embarrassed when I came over, how my presence made her life harder. My blood ran cold. I had never felt so betrayed. I remember sitting in the dark, the faint light from my phone illuminating my wrinkled hands, and feeling every memory of raising her the late nights, the scraped knees I kissed better, the sacrifices I made turn into a heavy weight pressing down on me. I wanted to call Daniel, confront him, ask why my own daughter spoke like that about me, but I didn't. I couldn't. Hours passed. The house was still silent, but inside, my mind was racing. I thought about Clara's words, over and over. I wondered if I had done something wrong, or if maybe she had always felt this way, and I never noticed. The hurt was deep, sharper than I expected. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had to think. By the time dawn approached, I had made a decision. I would leave quietly. I would go somewhere she could never guess, somewhere I could think and plan. I wasn't leaving in anger, I was leaving with purpose. A purpose she would never anticipate. I packed a small bag, taking only the essentials, my hands trembling slightly as I folded my shirts. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want her to know where I was going yet. This was not about revenge. This was about reclaiming the respect and dignity I thought I had lost. By the first light of morning, I stepped out of my front door, the cool air brushing against my face. The world felt different, somehow quieter, sharper, full of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. Today, things would change. The week before that night seemed normal, at least on the surface. But now, thinking back, I could see the little cracks that had been forming between Clara and me. I remembered the morning she dropped by unexpectedly, rushing in and out of the house like she had somewhere more important to be. I had offered her tea, as I always did, but she waved her hand and said, "I don't have time, Dad, really." Her words stung, but I let them slide. I told myself she was busy, stressed, or maybe just having a bad day. I reminded myself of all the times she had leaned on me, the nights I stayed up fixing her plumbing, or when I helped her with her finances without asking for anything in return. I believed love meant patience, even when it hurt. I saw her later that week, in the afternoon sunlight, laughing with Daniel in her kitchen. I watched from the doorway, quietly, and noticed how she rolled her eyes when I tried to tell a small joke. It wasn't dramatic, just a flicker of annoyance, but it cut deeper than any argument could. Daniel smiled politely at me, but there was tension in his eyes, the kind that said he noticed the strain too. That evening, I went to my neighbor, Mr. Lewis. He had lived next door for years and had a way of noticing things that escaped everyone else. I poured myself a cup of his strong tea, trying to calm the unease that had been gnawing at me all week. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" I asked him quietly. Mr. Lewis didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "She's drifting, Coleman," he said finally. "Not out of hate, but out of impatience. You've always been there for her, maybe too much. Sometimes people push away the ones they love most when they feel overwhelmed." His words settled like stones in my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me knew he was right. I thought about all the little moments I had ignored. Clara brushing me off, her subtle impatience, the quick sighs when I spoke. I had assumed it was temporary, that one day she would see how much I cared. That night, I sat alone, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. I remembered her childhood, the scraped knees, the lost toys, the nights she cried because she was scared. I had always been there. I had never left. And yet, the thought crossed my mind. Had I been blind to how she really felt all along? I tried to push the thought away, focusing on practical matters instead. I checked my small savings, wondering if I could afford a short trip to clear my mind. I looked at the toolbox I kept in the corner, the one I used for small jobs, and thought about how useful my hands were, how I could fix almost anything, except maybe the distance growing between my daughter and me. By the end of that week, tension had built quietly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I didn't know it yet, but the audio message that would arrive that night was waiting to expose the truth of her feelings. The cracks I had ignored were about to become a chasm. The days after that week felt heavier. Clara's behavior changed in ways I couldn't ignore. She no longer called just to check in. Now, it seemed every visit was a chore for her. One afternoon, I stopped by her house to drop off some groceries. I stood in the doorway, smiling, trying to catch her attention, but she barely looked up. "Dad, can you put these over there?" she said, pointing without even lifting her eyes from the chopping board. I placed the bags down, feeling the sting of her tone. It wasn't harsh, not exactly, but it carried a coldness I hadn't heard before. I caught Daniel watching from the corner of the kitchen. His eyes were concerned, hesitant, as if he didn't know whether to step in. That evening, I called Mr. Lewis and told him what had happened. He didn't offer advice, only listened. "People change," he said finally. "Sometimes we don't see it coming. You've given everything, and she's finding her own way. But remember, a person who pushes you away isn't always rejecting you. Sometimes they're just struggling with themselves." I understood his words, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest. Later that night, I found myself replaying old memories, teaching Clara to ride her bike, reading her stories when she couldn't sleep, watching her graduate from school with pride I couldn't put into words. I had always been there, and now, somehow, I felt invisible in my own daughter's life. The tension grew over small things. At dinner one night, I accidentally dropped a spoon on the floor. Clara flinched like I had done it on purpose. "Really, Dad?" she said. Her voice was sharp, filled with irritation. I felt my face heat up, my hands tremble slightly, but I said nothing. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze. Later, I overheard her talking to Daniel quietly in the living room. I didn't mean to, but her words carried through the thin walls. "He doesn't get it," she said. "He's always around, always interfering. I can't deal with it anymore." I sat in my car for a long while after, gripping the steering wheel, trying to understand. Every word she had spoken earlier in the week now made sense: the impatience, the irritation, the distant tone. It wasn't one night of anger. It had been building for a long time, and I had been blind. I returned home that night, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. The house was silent, but inside, I was restless. I began to think about what I could do, not to punish, but to protect myself, to reclaim a part of life I had lost without realizing it. And yet, I had no idea how quickly the truth would hit me. The next night, when the audio message arrived, it would shatter everything I thought I knew. The cracks in our relationship, which I had tried to ignore, were about to open wide. That night, sleep felt impossible. I tossed and turned, thinking about all the little signs I had ignored, all the moments when Clara had seemed distant or impatient. By the time my phone buzzed in the darkness, I was half expecting it, yet I still felt a jolt of tension when I saw her name on the screen. I pressed play. Her voice came through, casual at first, as if she didn't know I would hear it. But then the words hit me like a blow. "He's a burden," she said. "I can't stand pretending I care all the time. He's always in the way, always trying to fix things that don't need fixing." I sank into my chair, the floor cold beneath my hands. Every word she spoke seemed to echo through the empty house. She went on, talking about how she was embarrassed by my visits, how my presence frustrated her, how Daniel sometimes had to smooth over situations I didn't even know existed. My chest tightened, my heart pounded. I sat there for hours, replaying the audio, trying to find some mistake, some misinterpretation that would soften the blow. But it was all there, plain, harsh, real. My own daughter had spoken about me this way, about the father who had spent a lifetime supporting her, protecting her, loving her without question. As dawn approached, I felt a strange clarity. Pain still twisted in my chest, but it was accompanied by something else: purpose. I couldn't stay here, pretending everything was normal. I had to act, but not out of anger. I had to act to preserve myself, to take control of a situation that had left me powerless for too long. I quietly began packing a small bag, taking only what I needed: a few clothes, my wallet, a notebook, and a pen. I folded each shirt carefully, as though the act itself would give me strength. I scribbled a short note, not a letter of blame, not an accusation, just a few words to explain I needed time. She didn't need to know where I was going yet. When I stepped outside, the morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of dew and freshly cut grass. Mr. Lewis was already out, tending his small garden. He looked up at me with eyes that seemed to read everything, as if he already knew what had happened. "You've heard it," he said softly, not waiting for me to answer. I nodded, feeling the tension in my shoulders loosen slightly. "I have a plan," I told him. "Something she will never see coming." He didn't question me. He only gave a small nod of approval, like a teacher watching a student finally stand up for themselves. I took a deep breath and walked away from my house, leaving behind everything familiar. The street was quiet, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of control. My mind was already racing, thinking about the steps I needed to take, the small moves that would shift the balance of power without anyone realizing it. I didn't know how long it would take, or exactly what would happen next. But one thing was certain: I would no longer be invisible. Clara would learn, in her own way, that the father she thought she knew was not someone to dismiss lightly. By the time the sun fully rose, I was already far from the house I had called home for decades. The streets were quiet, the early morning haze softening the edges of buildings and trees. I had no clear destination, only a purpose. A plan had formed in my mind overnight. one that would make Clara finally see what she had overlooked for so long. I arrived at a small rental office and quietly secured a tiny cabin by the lake, a place I had visited once with Clara when she was a little girl. It was isolated, calm, and yet close enough that I could keep an eye on the city without being seen. I unpacked my bag, placed the notebook and pen on the small table, and sat in silence. The cool air from the open window carried memories of better times, laughing with Clara, teaching her to fish, the way she had once clung to my hand when she was scared of the dark. Then I began writing. I wrote everything I had felt, everything I had noticed but never voiced. I didn't hold back. I poured out the years of sacrifice, of silent love, of patience tested to its limit. I described her harsh words, the audio message that had shattered my world, and how it had made me realize the line between care and control had been blurred in her eyes. After finishing the first page, I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Clara had ignored subtle warnings before. This time, I needed something she could not dismiss. I carefully placed a small envelope in my bag, along with an old photograph of the two of us from her childhood, a memory she could not ignore, a reminder of the bond she had tried to dismiss. As the day went on, I returned to the city, moving quietly toward her neighborhood. I watched her house from across the street, invisible in the late afternoon shadows. Through the window, I could see her at the kitchen table, speaking to Daniel. Her laughter had a brittle edge, as if something in her world had shifted, but she didn't know why. I sent her a simple text. Check the mailbox. It's time we remembered who we are. Moments later, I slipped the envelope into her mailbox. Unseen, I left before she could notice, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. I didn't know how she would react. Would she be angry, confused, ashamed? By nightfall, I was home, sitting in my chair, waiting. Then came the soft sound of her door opening. Clara stepped outside, holding the envelope in her hand. I didn't move. I watched from the window as she slowly opened it, pulled out the photograph, and then read the note. Her eyes widened, then softened. Tears ran down her cheeks, not of anger, but realization. She looked around, almost expecting me to appear, and in that moment I understood something. The bond between parent and child is never truly broken. It can bend, it can twist, it can feel invisible, but it can also return, stronger than ever, when the truth is finally seen. I didn't rush to her. I stayed where I was, letting her reflect, letting her feel the weight of her words and my patience. In silence, I smiled. The plan had worked, not to punish, but to awaken. Clara would never see me the same way again, and in that quiet victory, I found peace. As Clara held the envelope in her hands, the realization slowly sank in. The harsh words, the frustration, the impatience, all of it finally met with the truth she had overlooked for so long. Sometimes, people we love take us for granted without even realizing it. But when patience and care meet courage and clarity, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. And that's exactly what happened that day. I didn't need to shout, argue, or force her to understand. I simply showed her the truth. And sometimes, that's the most powerful message of all. Thank you for watching this story. If you felt the twists, the suspense, and the emotions, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring even more unforgettable stories straight to you. Stay tuned, because the next story might just shock you even more.